Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, Christine, for the introduction. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, my name is Colm Walsh from the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, also known as MEDIN. And today I'll be talking to you about how MEDIN have built on an interoperable federated system to make it easier to find marine data. So, just for a quick bit of context, I'll just need to explain a little bit about MEDIN. So we are a long-term open partnership of marine organizations committed to improving access to marine science data. We're funded and governed by a consortium of sponsors who lead the UK in marine data management, and all of our sponsors are represented here at the bottom of the slide. And MEDIN's overall vision is, of course, for all UK marine data to be fair. And one of our key objectives is to support the UK marine sector to implement global and cross-domain interoperable marine data services. And because, as we all know, marine data are quite expensive to produce, and they're also a unique snapshot of a time and a place. So our ethos is to measure once, use many times. So yeah, essentially we work with UK organizations to deliver data to the marine community, and these data sets are then fed directly into the MEDIN portal, which you can now see here on the slide. So this is hosted by Maris, and it is a federated system that provides access to over 17,500 marine metadata data sets, and roughly 85% of these are actually provided directly by 7 MEDIN accredited data archive centers. All of their collections can be seen there on the far hand right. They can be accessed in blue there. And then the remaining 15% come directly from a mix of both public and private sector organizations. So there are over 600 different organizations in total that collect or manage marine data within our portal. So the portal then itself is underpinned by the MEDIN Discovery Metadata Standard, and the MEDIN standard itself is a marine profile of the UK Gemini standard, which in itself is a UK-specific profile of the EU Inspire directive, which of course is derived from ISO 19115, which is ISO's geographic information standard, and also ISO 19139, which is its XML implementation schema. So what makes the MEDIN standard marine specific is essentially the control vocabularies that we use. So for example, we both mandate or recommend multiple collections from the NERC vocabulary server, ICs, CDataNet, EPSG, just to name a few. Okay, so going on to our recent developments. So over the past year, we completed 2 developments in particular that enhanced the findability and interoperability of our marine data catalog. And of course, this subsequently boosted their accessibility and potential reuse value. And so yeah, the first of these was to make our catalog of metadata in our portal accessible using an API service. And the other was then to make our existing schema.org JSON-LD more interoperable and also to enrich it further by adding more properties to it. And this was mainly driven to expose our UK marine data holdings on Ocean Info Hub. So, starting with the API, one of our stakeholders needed to develop a custom digital solution that could both query and retrieve metadata from our catalog of dataset records. This was actually the Offshore Wind Evidence and Knowledge Hub, also known as OWECA. So this was an initiative that was funded by the Crown Estate. I believe Johnny Mitchell touched on it briefly yesterday in his talk. So seeing that the MEDIN portal itself, it runs off GeoNetwork software, so we simply decided to enable its existing CSW API functionality, and that is, of course, an acronym for Catalog Service of the Web. And of course, GeoNetwork CSW API is also compliant with the OGC CSW standard. So then, once this was actually enabled, it didn't take too much technical intervention itself to get the API working, but we did need that human aspect to, tweak and adjust it to make it function the way we actually want it to. So both the Crown Estate and their contractor kindly collaborated with MEDIN to test the API to make sure it all functioned correctly and was doing what we wanted it to. And then in return, they got the use of a nice new shiny OGC compliant API service that lets them retrieve metadata for the service that they were creating. And so yeah, so that work was completed, and just last month we published our user guidance for anyone who's interested in calling on our API to query our data catalog service. So that can be accessed there by just clicking the API button there, and you can see all of the instructions pasted overneath. Okay, so the next enhancements brings us to Ocean Info Hub. We've talked about it extensively throughout this conference, so I won't go into too much detail about what it is, but just like Medin, Ocean Info Hub facilitates the discovery and interoperability of existing information systems across multiple sectors, such as the private and public sector. And as you've seen already, every day probably so far of this conference, this is the Ocean Info Hub data portal landing page, where all of these resources can be searched for and accessed. And because one of Medin's main objectives is to support the UK marine sector to implement global and cross-domain interoperable marine data services, we sought to partner with Ocean Info Hub to make our metadata searchable on their portal so we can reach a broader and more international user community. So Ocean Info Hub themselves, they publish their metadata resources using schema.org, the vocabulary, and JSON-LD as the markup. So one of the benefits then for Medin being an organization where a key objective of ours is to boost cross-domain interoperability is that sometimes you get lucky and you already have that infrastructure in place already to be compatible with other systems. So this was the case for us because we already had a basic JSON-LD schema.org mapping to some of the key Medin metadata elements so that we could publish on Google dataset search. But it was more of a basic mapping of core elements such as your title, abstract, keywords, temporal spatial coverage. But this was actually enough for us to actually get our 17,500 records on there with minimal-ish effort. So then with our recent development, we further enriched our JSON-LD so that we could describe our metadata better on their portal by adding additional metadata elements and also making some interoperability enhancements to our existing schema.org properties. So the additional properties we added were conditions of access, node identifiers, SD publisher, provider, and of course the all-important distribution, because everyone wants to be able to actually access the data that the record itself is actually describing, so that's the most fair addition of them all. Then we also made interoperability enhancements to the keywords property included in data catalog and also spatial coverage. So just to give you a quick example here of our keywords property. So this was originally a URL link, which was just the link to the NVS term itself. Not the most fair, but not exactly ideal. But now it actually specifies the term name, also well, it's maintained the URL, but also defines the collection URL and also the term code itself. And then moving on to spatial coverage. So initially it was just simply the bounding box information, but so we built on this to include the coordinate reference system information using additional property. And in this instance, including the CRS vocabulary, it also appears here on the metadata, just making that little bit more interoperable. And another thing I think is worth highlighting as well is that we also made our JSON-LD format downloadable from each dataset landing page. So you can see here that it's hyperlinked there. So if anyone's interested in seeing how we've mapped from our ISO XML to JSON-LD, feel free to have a look. And yeah, going back to Ocean Info Hub. So now, as you can see, Medin's metadata catalog is now live, and we are currently the biggest catalog of data sets on their portal at present. And if you use Ocean Info Hub spatial search feature and filter for Medin, you can see all of the spatial coverage of the data sets that all of our stakeholders have published. And if you look at the Northeast Atlantic in particular, it's quite comprehensively covered, so much so you can't even really see the UK, Ireland, and much of Western Europe on there. But yeah, so just to quickly summarize, exposing the metadata using the API and also being a contributor to Ocean Info Hub has increased our fairness and allowed us to reach a broader and more international audience who can now benefit from Medin's Discovery Metadata Catalog, and then subsequently supports our ethos, measure once, use many times. And of course, seeing I've got a few seconds left, for anyone who's interested, please check us out on our website and on Ocean Info Hub. And our newsletter, Marine Data News, and follow us on social media. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Perfect timing as well. Questions?
Hi, very nice. Line up with what we're doing in Iliad, also extending the metadata. And I wonder if you extended the examples like spatial coverage, are you contributing back to schema.org or anything that can be reused by others, like your LD context for this extended?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, if you're extending the elements, like definition of the spatial coverage,
yeah.
Are you contributing back to the schema.org or somewhere else that everybody can use the same frames in the same way?
Not at the moment. In fact, I took it wasn't actually we didn't conceive that. ESIP have some very nice best practice mappings and advice for schema.org. So if you are doing it, I'd highly recommend it. So they seem to be doing some nice, I wouldn't say, well, kind of standardization. So we looked at that, and also in the Ocean Info Hub team itself, one of the group is quite prominent with ESIP, and he advised on many of our mappings as well. I should also note as well that Ocean Info Hub have a resource called The Book, where they also provide advice on how to best map to schema.org elements as well.
Hey, thank you. No, I was just curious because you mentioned the API from GeoNetwork, that you had some issues to kind of tune it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having the same problem here at AMR. My colleague Aska just presented that, and it's the last part of this pipeline that we have now where we are struggling a bit. So this is more a call for help, probably. So it would be a pleasure to perhaps meet you and talk later. Aside from that, I was just wondering the endpoint that you provide for the downloading the JSON LD.
Yes.
Is it directly linked to the SparkQL endpoints in Ocean Info Hub, or it's or you have already the files?
So they harvested from our sitemap.
Okay.
So they just draw it all in from there.
Okay.
I don't know the ins and outs of how their system does all its indexing on Otis, but that's essentially how it works. And with regards to the API, I wasn't particularly involved with that, but I know that I'll definitely be able to put you to the individuals that were, and also Maris as well, where they host us, so they would also be able to help with that.
Okay.
To get it right. But it was mostly things like, it was only outputting 50 records, when we wanted to be outputting like 100 per list. Do you know when you have those options like 30, 50, 100, all of them? Little things like that. The defaults just weren't exactly the most intuitive. That was my understanding from the feedback that I received at the time from my colleagues. But yeah, definitely glad to help out and share knowledge on that one.
Thank
100%.
you.
Thank you so much again, Colm.